Welcome back to the Sharpest College Football Podcast. This is part two of our offseason developments episode. Recommend that you catch part one first to get the good lead into this. I am BuckMetrics, joined as always by Robert Martin. Robert, you've got quite a little, not even a little, you've got a substantial presentation to get here and probably one of the
Yes.
biggest offsite developments here.
Yeah. So just a bit of behind the scenes here. When we obviously make these slideshows ahead of time, the original plan was for there to be just one podcast named Offseason Developments. And right before we recorded it, you were like, "Oh, if it's like too long, we'll just split it in half." And you're like, "If we get to 45 minutes and we still haven't finished gotten to the Senate bill, then we'll just do it two halves." And then we were right before the Senate bill, and we were already over an hour, and I was like, "All right, we're calling it." So this became a two-parter. So you will see the first part out a couple days probably after this. We've got those all edited already. We're gonna record stuff. I'm gonna try to hopefully get a steady stream of stuff coming out. So you're looking at a podcast every couple days, right till the beginning of the season, and then we're right back into it. So we'll just a little bit longer to space stuff out, but yeah, you should see at least probably two podcasts a week from us until the season here. So yeah, it's going to be fun. But no, so the topic of today, I'm going to enjoy this one here. This is the Protect College Sports Act, the Senate bill here. So this is the thing that's gotten a lot of attention. I'm sure if you've probably watched other college football shows, they've talked about this as well. They've talked about the top line things of what this means and whether or not this will pass or not. But we're going to talk about some other things that they may not necessarily talk about. Obviously, everybody knows what this thing does by this point, and we're going to touch on that briefly. We're going to talk more about why this exists in the first place and what the impacts of it would be if this thing were to pass, and that they may have missed some things in constructing this bill. So basically, what this does is this bill would grant the NCAA an antitrust exemption. We'll talk a bit about that in a second. It also does a bunch of other random side quests too. One of which is a coach can't leave their team before the end of the year, which is just I don't even know why that's in this bill. That's not a thing that you should or even try to regulate because that's not even what happened. But okay, this has advanced through committee, and the next stop is the Senate vote. And now there's lots of other procedural problems. We'll talk about that later, but that's where this stands right now. On to the next slide. So it's called the Protect College Sports Act. But what exactly are we protecting college sports from, right? But if you look at the numbers, you look at media revenue, people watching games, people watching playoff, people watching polls, people watching March Madness. College sports seems pretty okay, right? Doesn't seem to be any major issues. Universities aren't folding, but there are some problems, right? And I think what the actual problems of college football are depend a lot on who you're asking. If you were to ask me or Buck what the problems are, I think we would say probably something completely different than what's even on the slide. I'd say the problem is the fact that you have conferences and teams that are not even remotely on the same level competing with each other, and that they should be competing on a same level, and that there should probably be some sort of better system than the committee. That's the biggest problems I'd see. But that's not what this bill doesn't even talk about those issues. But the main issues with the conferences are this. So the Big Ten and the SEC, obviously the two biggest conference, they're really upset, and their biggest issues is the constant NCAA lawsuits. That's the House settlement. Then there was the other. There's been a tons of legal battles. The Brendan Sorsby thing, all these constant lawsuits and legal battles between about eligibility and reinstatement and who can play or not. Again, there was that huge issue with the one NBA player. He got drafted in the NBA, played the G League, and then he didn't make it the NBA team, so he just went back to, I believe it was Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's a problem for the Big Ten and the SEC. You can't say this is amateur sports and then have someone go to a professional league and then come back because he had more eligibility remaining. Rules changing each year, again, exactly the same thing, right? One year something happens, one year something's okay, and then one year something not okay, and the next year then someone sues and all of a sudden it's okay. And then obviously different state laws. This applies pretty much to everyone, but again, how things are regulated in each state specifically, and those endorsement deals, it varies a lot by individual states. That being said, the ACC and the Big 12, they think there's very different problems with college football. Their problem is they're mad that they keep losing recruits to the Power Twos, the Big Ten, the SEC. They will basically recruit these guys, and then they'll play for them for a year, then they'll be good, and then all of a sudden they just go to the Big Ten, go to the SEC, and they feel cheated. They're like, we spent all this money recruiting this guy, we developed him, and all of a sudden he's gone. NIL costs too much. Again, they're going to pay them a ton of money. We can't pay them that money, so then we just lose them, right? And then the revenue is too low, right? At the same point in time, you're spending all this money, you're massively in debt, and you're trying to get these players, and then the second they're good, they just up and leave. So that's what they think the problem with that is. And the G6, which now exists because of the Pac-12, just all the above. They're just like all those things are problems. They have a lot of problems in the G6 and obviously in level below that. They're just like everything is wrong. We can't compete. Any good player we have is immediately taken. We have no amount of revenue. Our media deals are way too small, and that's the thing. So the bill exists. It's supposed to try to fix everything because, again, we're granting the antitrust exemption. We're going to get to in a second. But then it also tries to fix a bunch of these random other things that you can't really fix with legislation. A lot of these are just the system itself, and you have to fix the system. And I don't think you can just start legislating random fixes to some of this stuff. So let's go to the next slide here.
I will point out that random fixes
Oh,
is tremendous characterization.
it is. That's yes. All right. So we're going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but don't worry, it does make sense in 2 slides from now. So this is a picture of me actually back when I was. This is me just teaching a random programming class. Again, very simple for loop, just teaching basic introductory programming here, just doing a bit of a lecture there at Brock University, wearing my what I would could view as professor chic there, just a nice sweater, like zipper sweater. That's your classic professor getup. So I think what a lot of people are asking, if we go to the next slide, is that looks a lot like Dante Moore playing football. Now that sounds crazy, but it actually is more similar than you think. Both are representing a university. I'm representing Brock University, and Dante Moore there is representing Oregon. We're both actually producing value for the university. My take, because I'm teaching a course, students are obviously enrolled in that course, so they're paying tuition to the university. So I actually generate revenue for the university, and I'm compensated for that revenue. They pay me a salary. Versus Dante Moore, obviously producing orders of magnitude more value, but still value just the same. And that's through media deals, ticket revenue, jersey sales, all that stuff. That's the same thing, different scales of numbers, but still the general same thing. And we're both compensated. I get paid, and graduate students in Canada, at least domestic ones, basically your tuition is paid for and you are a TA on top of that. You're actually mandated to be a TA, which is just a cool job in general, so that's fine. And then you get paid for being the teaching assistant. And Dante Moore is compensated. I should have put tuition there. He technically does get an academic scholarship, and he does get NIL money, which now is officially from the university, but also can be from other sources as well, but from other sources as well. So now let's go to the next slide and talk about how these things are different. So as a TA at Brock University, I'm a member of the Graduate Student Union. It's a CUPE union, whatever. You don't need to get into the details of it, but basically it's a union. And the university and the union negotiate on compensation, working conditions, etc. Right? The university, this is a point of bargaining. The university could say, we want TAs to work 30 hours a week. And the union will say, no, that's way too much. They're still trying to complete their own degree. You got to get that down to 25 or something. The union could say, if you're going to have them work more hours, then they're going to have to be compensated more. And the university says, how about this? There's a negotiation that goes there. The university obviously represents the university, and the graduate student union represents me. And also, the university, this doesn't really mostly apply for TAs, but you can discipline a TA based on conduct, and that's also as negotiated with the union. So, for example, if a TA does something that they don't like, if you hit a student or you basically trade money for grades or any number of unethical things, which again, basically no one does, but they don't even give you answers for the stuff anyways. You'll mark the test, but they won't give you answers before anyways. But that is negotiated. So if I do something wrong, the university can discipline me. They can remove me from a class. They could just straight up fire me. They could do whatever they want. Now we go to Dante Moore's column, and all of those are N/A. And this is crazy, he's just doing this. He's just going there every Saturday, just kind of doing it. He's just playing football. And sometimes they get on a flight to some part of the country, and sometimes he just does it there. He's just kind of doing it. There's probably some sort of waiver you sign, of academic athletic waiver, but that's it. He's not represented in any way. The university doesn't negotiate with him salary salary, working conditions, etc. He just kind of does this, and that's it. So moving on to the next slide here. This is the problem, is the fact that the way it works is that the NFL doesn't have the problem that the NCAA has. They have a long history of disciplining players for misconduct, gambling, criminal offenses. Everybody knows the story of a player getting banned. More, and I'll just say this one specifically. There is one very specific case that I thought was personally interesting. Jameson Williams, he was the wide receiver drafted by the Detroit Lions. He did gamble, but he basically gambled at the team facility. He was betting on MLB games in the offseason, and he was suspended for 3 games for betting on random baseball games just because he was doing it. He did it in the facility. I guess just between weights, just getting in some baseball parlays. But that's a 3 game suspension. But the reason that's a 3 game suspension is because the NFL and the NFLPA, the Players Union, Players Association, which is a union, they negotiated that contract. And in that contract, it said the NFL, if you do something against the code of conduct, we can suspend you or do whatever we want because we negotiated that with the union. That doesn't exist in college football. And that's the problem is that for an antitrust exemption, which means that you're not a monopoly, basically a monopoly in this case is we are college football. If you want to play for us, you have to do what we say. You don't get to sign this contract. We can do whatever we want to you. And when the reason that they keep losing in court is because any lawyer is taking them to court now on NIL, on Brendan Sorsby, on eligibility, and saying you can't mandate these things because there is no negotiated contract. They're just doing this. He just shows up and plays football. You can't impose these things on him because there's no contract. So that's what the Senate bill and Congress is trying to do. They're trying to say, okay, we are exempting college football we're making them immune to antitrust laws. We're saying yes, they're a monopoly, but it's okay. We approve of this monopoly. And that's the whole point of this is that all of this could go away. This could go away easily, and the NCAA could do whatever they want if they create a college players union and they negotiate everything they want with that union, and then it's done. That's it. You don't need to pass this through committee. Nick Saban doesn't have to show up there and sit in front of a microphone for 4 hours. None of that has to happen. If you negotiate and you create a players union and you negotiate with that players union, you could do whatever you want. You could have your 5-and-5 year eligibility. You can have your one transfer. You can even cap NIL deals. You can do whatever you want. All you need to do is do that. But the alternative is we just try to ram a bill through Congress, having mostly Republicans support it, as we'll talk about in a second. And that's the alternative. The only other way is that we either create a union or we go through Congress. And for some reason, we have this. And this is the point of the whole slide comparison with me and Dante Moore. Because in all honesty, there's not a huge difference between those two things. Yes, obviously, there is differences for obvious reasons. But when you look down to it, when you take it down to its essence, it's functionally the same thing. Mm-hmm. There is no reason why athletes in college should not be employees. There's no reason. It's insane. It's just because they don't want to have to negotiate with a union. They don't want to have to pay out health claims. They want to get this as cheap as possible. And the only other way, other than negotiating a players union, is you try to ram this bill through Congress. So next slide.
One thing on here real quick.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
To the title of the slide, why does the NCAA keep losing in court? Not only is it these 5 bullet points, I think that a amplifying factor is that the NCAA dunces truly, look at my laser pointer here, these last 3 points, it's like they don't understand these concepts at all. And they keep on going into a war they can't win. And I don't understand that at all. And I don't know if they're just volunteering to be slaughtered and embarrassed, or they genuinely don't know better. I don't want to let them off the hook for just being not just inept, but just stupid too in that regard.
Yeah. They keep acting like treating them as employees would like irreparably destroy college sports. College sports would be destroyed. No one would watch it if these guys are salaried employees, which is nuts. That's insane. That has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
Students work all the time. Anybody who's gone to university, gone to the student hall, the cafeteria, that person there is generally a student, right? That's the same. Again, it's the exact same thing. You're providing labor to benefit university. Now, the scale is significantly different, obviously, but it's the same concept. You are providing labor to do this, but it's the whole thing of, oh no, they can't be employees because they're amateur. It's like these people are not amateurs. These players have been coached and taught this. They have spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. These quarterbacks have gone through quarterback camps. These players have gone through all this coaching. They have spent tens of thousands of dollars to get here. These are not amateurs by any stretch of the imagination. You're not just like picking up kids off the quad and being like, you're the starting quarterback this weekend. No, these are not amateurs. And the fact that you can just fix all of your problems if you do this is just insane. And you have to get up, grow up, make them employees, and then this all ends. You don't have to have
Yeah,
these insane legal fights in Congress. You don't have to try to barter your way and negotiate it. And then watch what, like, then you'll see the Senate bill in a second. They threw in a bunch of random side quests. And the
that's,
Big Ten and SEC are not happy about that. And I suspect at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of people in the Big Ten and SEC that are kind of like,
hmm
you know what, maybe just treating them like employees would make this a lot easier. This would be a lot easier than having to deal with the other random junk they threw in this bill too,
yeah.
right? So
It's honestly, I'm not exaggerating. It is like nobody in the NCAA offices actually read the Supreme Court decision against them. It's like they
yeah,
don't get it. They don't get it. Okay, sorry to jump in there. So the
yeah,
act itself.
yeah. So it's, I think we can recall it to protecting college sports from having to create a players union act is, I think, the better name for it.
Yes.
Because again, it's like you're pretending, if, oh, we're protecting it from what, an asteroid hitting the planet. No, you're protecting them from having to create a players union is really what this bill about. So it gives them the same antitrust protection as other leagues, but there's no players union. That's the entire act of Congress. Only Congress can do that. Should they do that? I don't think so, but whatever. And then also, here's a bunch of other random side quests. So in there is 5 and 5 years eligibility. So you have 5 years to use your 5 years of eligibility. I think the NCAA also passed that as a law,
Yeah.
but also that nothing the NCAA does matter. So it doesn't even matter. So you just do whatever you want now with that. Only one free transfer, unless your coach leaves, then you get another free one. Now, this is where I've seen other podcasts talk about this, and they just gloss over this. And you don't actually think about what this will mean. We're going to do that. So we're going to put in a little asterisk there. That's going to be a big point here in a second. Forces coach to stay with team throughout playoffs and bowl, and they somehow calling this the Lane Kiffin rule, even though he actually said he wanted to stay with Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss said you have to leave. This is completely pointless. He wanted, it's like, it's not a rule for, like, you're calling it for the Lane Kiffin rule, but he wanted to stay. This is the thing on the university. Not, you should call it the Ole Miss rule, not the Lane Kiffin rule. So I don't, people blame Lane Kiffin for that, but he at the time said he wanted to stay with the team. So again, just a random side quest. It has nothing to do with saving college sports. So whatever. You randomly kneecap Big Ten and SEC expansion, saying that they can't expand, they can't add more teams. Okay, I don't even know why that's in this bill. Again, the SEC and Big Ten getting bigger is not particularly a problem. I don't understand why them adding more teams is just detrimental to college sports. Legislatively prohibits creation of a super league somehow. I'm not sure how you even do that because there's like infinite ways around there. Like you can't mandate that if, say, I'll just use the University of Oregon or have, say, the University of Oregon says, no, we are not going to play in the NCAA anymore. How can you mandate them that they have to? There's infinite ways around that to get into it. There's no way you can legislate that. And then also forces the Big Ten and SEC, and by extension, all the other leagues, to pool media revenue. So that means it'd be one big media deal instead of separate ones with different networks. If 70% of FBS schools agree, which the SEC and Big Ten are obviously very mad about that one, on top of also being targeted for expansion and the Super League for some reason, again. But it's questionable how those will, I guess the Big Ten and SEC expansion would work, but then also the Super League thing would definitely not work. There's no way you can mandate that a team stay in an organization because they could just leave or not feel the team and then do something. Like there's infinite ways around that one. So
Yeah.
yeah,
On that point, on the expansion, the co-author, the co-authors of this bill are Ted Cruz and Maria Cantwell. Maria Cantwell is, I'd love to, as a consultant, explain to somebody their own job. Maria Cantwell from Washington. She's literally taken the position of Oregon State and Washington State, representing all of 1.3% of FBS, and saying, I'm going to keep this never happening again because two schools out of 140 got the short end of the stick. I think that might be the poison pill, but not to spoil anything. But that nobody likes that. But let's go on.
yeah. I'm gonna go to the next slide. So some problems with some of the
Mike
stuff
Gravel
here.
is angry here,
So
huh?
yeah, so the one transfer per college student, unless head coach leaves, is going to unintentionally destroy college football. So this is basically people being like, oh, every year there's so many students that transfer, all the good players, my team has a good year, and then all of a sudden all the good players leave. They get angry about that. So this is their attempt to try to fix that. This is their attempt to try to fix it really poorly because they didn't think about what this would mean. So let's walk through some of the scenarios in the season. And again, before there were transfers, none of this happened. None of this mattered. But now that you're opening up the door for one transfer, all these bullet points apply. So let's say a Power Four team fires a head coach. So it's Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12. That school, because they have one they get a new free transfer now. They will pick over any talent on that roster. Any 4 or 5 star on that roster is going to get a free transfer to any bigger Big Ten or SEC team, and they're going to use that free transfer because it's okay. I can basically say you're Dan Lanning or Kurt Signetti, and let's say that I don't know a school. And again, this pick is obvious. This pick of Mike Gravel is obviously unrelated, but let's say that somehow a team in the ACC fired their head coach,
Yes.
and let's say that they had a couple 4 or 5 stars on their roster. Then, because you've now limited transfers to one free per student, now they're like, okay, there's any 4 or 5 stars on there. Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, probably Texas, they're all going to offer all those kids because they're going to say, hey, you take your free transfer, get out there. Anyone with even any remote amount of talent who's shown any promise is going to be pulled away by those bigger schools. And that's going to make a new rebuild infinitely harder. Because now, before where would a head coach get fired and you could pay extra money maybe to retain some of those athletes, they're all gone now because they get a free transfer, so they're going to get rated completely. Every available talent that's going to get removed. It's going to make and also it's going to make a non-power two raid for coaches and good rosters even more valuable as a package deal. So you're already starting to see this last year, where Oklahoma State raided North Texas. They took the head coach. They took Drew Messamaker. USF went to Auburn. Byron Brown went to Auburn as well. Iowa State. Matt Campbell went to Penn State, and he took the entire team basically. James Madison a couple of years ago, Kurt Signetti took basically the entire roster. This is now going to be the most important thing. So and again, this is something that the non-power two schools have been pushing for. So shout out to them, who they said they were tired of re-recruiting our rosters every year. So now, instead of having to do that, now if you have a good season, if you have a 9 or 10 win season, next year your head coach will leave and the entire roster will leave, and now your win total next year is going to be 3 wins. So good job. That's good. I'm sure this is exactly what you intended, right? Because that's what this is going to be now. The second you have a good year as a non P2 school, your entire roster and head coach are going to get rated because that's the only way now the bigger schools can rebuild. So good job on that. To say on that?
The next order kind of consequence that I see is okay. For example, what's his name? Matt Campbell at Iowa State was backfilled by Jimmy Rogers from Washington State. He brought some guys from Washington State. Washington State made a good hire with Kirby Moore. Um, I don't. I think that's going to be the exception rather than the rule because um, I think you're going to see just kind of going down another level, getting head coaches just to kind of fill your roster with guys.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do it with a coordinator, but I think that this kind of filters its way down. And it makes it harder for a coordinator to get that first head coaching job. They might have to go down another level than what they otherwise would have, which is good news for the beloved CUSA and Mac. And they need some help. So maybe that's the one beneficiary, but at the expense of the career of these gentlemen that are doing this.
That's a good point, right? Because if why would you hire a coordinator when you can hire just a coach that has a decent team in a lower conference, right?
And now you've got that need because you lost your coach to Iowa State or Penn State. You've got a bunch of guys that followed.
Yeah. And like that's the thing, right? You make the example of Iowa State. Iowa State would be they're still in rough shape this year, but like they'd be completely toast. Same thing with North Texas. Like now they're still in not great shape, but now it's not even just going to be like a 1 year
Yeah.
rebuild and then we're okay. It's like a 2 3 year rebuild now, which is again, if people remember, that's how college football used to be. You go back before the NIL and transfer era, a new head coach would be hired, it'd be a 2 3 year rebuild. We don't talk about that as much anymore because we talk about like Deion Sanders, where you just bring in a bunch of kids, and that's fine. But it used to be, oh, this is year one. Let's see what he could do in year one. Oh, okay, year two, maybe a bit of improvement. Year three, okay, let's see if he's got it. That's what it used to be. That's
Yeah.
not even going to be the case. Like that, we're going to go right back to that. Which again, I think that was the problem. Like this is the argument that people are going to have. People will say that, oh, I hate the infinite transfers. Okay, but it fixed other problems. Like you could fire a coach, hire a new coach, and be competitive that next year. It's going to be years now, and I don't think people have quite realized that.
Yeah. And I guess North Texas brings up a good example. I think This curtails a lot what we called in the last podcast the second act guys. A Neil Brown, when it's this kind of dynamic and he's goes from unemployed to getting that job, that's tough. That North Texas isn't going to do that in the future. A program like UConn that's desperate, that'll take anybody. But again, the CUSA, it probably makes out better. A Neil Brown starting over will probably have to be at a much lower level, especially
Yeah.
if it's not like James Franklin where you're immediately fired. When you take that 1 year off, that could be lethal.
And that's the other thing too, right? What would you? James Franklin didn't really bring much in terms of players to Virginia Tech,
A
right?
few,
That's the thing.
yeah,
A
and
few, but if he had waited a year, he wouldn't have had that, right? So this is the thing where it's like if you don't get hired months after getting fired,
yeah,
you're well, actually weeks in some cases,
yeah,
then you're done, right? Because you're going to have to go down to Kusa or the Mac or whatever to get a head coaching job, and then spend 2 to 3 years there, and then maybe you can jump back up because then you have a decent program, and then you can take all of them with you on their free transfer,
yep,
right?
yep,
So this is now the other thing too, where basically this is the other issue here too, is that and in the bill itself, when you're talking about the issues, right? Because the Big Ten and SEC are against it, but weirdly enough, they are not saying that they have a problem with the one transfer rule. They're quiet about that. They are totally fine with that because they probably gamed this out just as we have.
yep.
Because here's the other issue too: a G6 or ACC or Big 12 player. Let's say you have a good season, right? And this is Darian Mensah here would be the classic example because he was at where was he at Washington State before? Was
Uh,
Washington State?
no, he was at Tulane.
Tulane, that's right. He was at Tulane. He was at Tulane and then he transferred to Duke and then went to Miami. Now I say power in this slide I say like at Big Ten SEC offer, but obviously top ACC and Big
Yeah,
12 would replicate that. But this is the thing: the Darian Minnesota Duke thing last year, that's never going to happen again because you only have one transfer.
yeah,
So at this point now, why would he transfer to Duke? He's going to wait for
yeah,
Florida to come knocking or Indiana, or if at that point if Summerall had left, he'd go with Summerall, right? So that middle transfer of going to a middle tier ACC or Big 12 school or middle tier Big 10 or SEC school, that's gone now. So all those middle class schools that are mad about this, they're like, oh, we have to pay so much money for recruiting and NIL and stuff. Guess what? You've now lost your kind of like ability to get a step up quarterback. That's gone now. So if you have a quarterback problem, you're in deep trouble now. You're those A lot of those programs are going to be in deep trouble for many years now. Whereas before they could have gotten a decent quarterback from the portal, they can't now anymore because now they're going to be waiting for a better offer than just the best offer you got was Duke. Okay, I'll take Duke. Now it's best offer I got was Duke. No, I'll wait it out. I'll wait for Miami next year. That's the thing. And then on the flip side,
real
a
quick on that.
player. Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead. Yeah.
just so a program like Duke, I'm going to give you a name, and there's going to be alternate universe here. Devin Brown, do you remember that name? He's like the third string quarterback at Ohio State.
Yes.
Duke will get like the senior season of Devin Brown after it's clear to him that he's never going to start a game at Ohio State. And they're going to have a
Exactly.
series of guys like from big programs that have taken 5 snaps in their life
Yeah.
at the end of
And that's
blowout.
yeah.
That's
And
just
that's the exact next. If a Big Ten SEC player has a bad season, they're not going to transfer down. So like DJ Lagway is a perfect example of this, right? Highly touted quarterback, was a Heisman candidate, one of the up there near the top of the board for Heisman last year, around there. Not That's not crazy, but he was a lot was expected of him last year for sure. We could definitely say that. Had a horrible year with Florida. And then instead of sitting on the bench for Florida this year, he elected to transfer down to Baylor. So guess what? Baylor gets a quarterback from the transfer portal. That's great. But now, as you mentioned as well, he will never do that because you transfer down to Baylor, that's it, you're done. He will sit there at Florida, sit on the bench until they run out of quarterbacks, and then he'll hope to get back on the field. Or, as you mentioned, senior year, last year of eligibility, fine, he'll transfer somewhere else, play there, but that's it. But he'll be very untested. He'll have had very few snaps in all of SBS. He may or may not be good or not, but a middle tier school is going to have to take a chance on him, probably pay him a ton of money, and that's it. These guys are going to just sit on the bench, and the top schools are going to keep this talent. And again, obviously, I'm using DJ Lagway as a stand-in here. That could be any 5-star, any 4-star. You got a 5-star O line, 5-star D line. If they have a rough year, they're not going to transfer down for more playing time. They're just going to sit there on the bench and all that star power, it's just going to stay with those top teams. You're like Baylor would, like, who would be Baylor's quarterback this year if DJ Legway hadn't transferred? They have a quarterback now. They actually get to be competitive potentially this year. Whereas if this new one transfer rule happens, they don't have a quarterback, and I don't know who their quarterback is. So this is what, again, SEC and Big Ten, they have not said anything about the transfer rule. They're totally fine with it. If I'm the ACC and the Big 12, you should be wargaming this out and realizing that you're going to lose from this.
Yeah, and the other thing too, that's the thing that they don't talk about that's definitely done is the runoff, where basically, 2 years into the program, the coach is like, "You're not going to play here." Go talk to my friends at Kennesaw State, and I, if there's only one, can they force that? Can they just say you're not going to play, and awesome, and you're not on the team? You can't force a transfer. Are you basically going to be putting a lot of kids in this young men in this weird spot where they're not on the team? You can't. The part of that bargain is you can't revoke their scholarship. You have to keep them on scholarship. They're not on the team. They don't count against the count. So you might have these ancillary guys that kind of just are dead weight because you can't force them to transfer.
I'd say that if you're Florida or Ohio State, like, you don't, for the money, you don't care about the money, right? You would gladly, like, here's the thing, right? Worst case scenario, you have DJ Lagway as a backup, right? You get extra depth at O line, D line. Okay, maybe they're not the greatest, but you'll take it, right? Because what happens if that, like, you're making a championship run and all of a sudden your depth guys, like, that's the thing. I think they're not going to care. They're just be like, fine, you can sit on the bench. And then, no,
Okay.
maybe in some cases, yeah, if someone's a distraction or something, sure. But other than that, like,
Yes.
maybe there's a conversation that you, like, maybe, like, again, theoretically, and again, we'll use the DJ Lagway example because it fits so well here. But let's say that in 2 years from now, like year two of John Summerall, he says, because Aaron Philo is the one who's expected to start for Florida, spoiling a bit of the Florida one, but that's fine, the Florida preview. But let's say he says, okay, Aaron Philo's our guy. He's going to be here for another year, and DJ Lagway's running. That was his second year, right? So that'd be third year would be this year, fourth year would be next year. Going into that fourth year, someone else says, you're never starting for us. This is our guy, and we've got another guy waiting in the wings. Best you're going to be for us ever as a backup. Lagway now has to make the call of because again, Philo could go down and injured. This is a very brutal sport, right? He can
Mm-hmm.
make the call of, would I rather have the chance of being a backup and called on if something happens, or would I rather go down and start for Baylor? We'll just keep using Baylor as an example, even though that wouldn't apply, but whatever, right? That's the call they're going to have to make. And I'm fairly sure. Now, for quarterback, I think it's different. For quarterback, I think the calculus is you have to go transfer down and go somewhere else. But for any other position, you could just be a depth guy, a depth running back, a depth like O lineman, cornerback. You'll get on the field, you'll get snaps. That's the thing, right? Like, you will get on the field. Quarterback is different, and the only one that doesn't really apply for. But any other depth position player, the lower tier is going to lose out on these guys. You're not going to have any more. They're not going to be able to pick up any of these depth guys just sitting on the roster, because these guys would much rather play 5 snaps a game on the bench as like a backup O lineman than drop down and be stuck on, say, Baylor, right? So that's
Yeah.
the thing, because they know they're going to get a lot more attention as someone from Florida or from Ohio State, right? So,
Yeah. Yep. All right. Next slide.
yeah, next slide.
Okay.
So, some other issues here too. Obviously, the big one is the one transfer rule that no one's really thought of. But the second one is that this stopping the Big Ten and SEC from adding new schools. So this was originally written as just the SEC and the Big Ten can't add schools, add any more schools. Which, again, the SEC and Big Ten were like, "What the heck? Why are you calling us out here?" But then they rewrote it to say any league with over $1 billion in revenue can't expand. So that means that the ACC is now immediately caught in that, and the Big 12 will be soon. The problem with this, okay, it sounds good if you think that conference expansion is killing college football. Okay, I don't think it actually is. There's no real issue. There's no evidence that's saying that bigger conferences are killing college sports. So okay, but if that's what you think is the problem, you're forgetting that inflation exists. And again, here, just in 2006, if something was worth $600 million in 2026 dollars, 20 years from now, that's over $1 million. So this will eventually lock in the P4. This will eventually lock in. It's already locked in 3 of the Big 4. Eventually, the Big 12 will. Again, and the thing is, these media deals are rise much faster than inflation because of the way this is just the inflation example is actually dumb because these media deals are rising way faster than the rate of inflation. So even in that case, Like this will eventually lock in the P4, and then after that's going to start eventually with inflation, it will start locking in the G6 schools to eventually the point where there will be no pathway for any FCS school to get up because they eventually, and yes, even the MAC will be hit by this eventually. A loaf of bread might be like $10, but like that, like probably closer to $20. But at that point, then yeah, no one can even no one can even join the MAC at that point. So yeah,
Yeah, and I get who. Yeah, I mentioned this before. Literally, who besides Washington State in 2021 and Oregon State in 2021 wants this? Does
yeah,
Miami doesn't want this? Clemson doesn't want this. Florida State doesn't want this.
yeah. A
Who?
big chunk of the ACC doesn't want this either.
This literally seems
Like revenge for Oregon State and Washington
well,
State.
it is, it is. But where I'm going with this is, this seems the ultimate. Who was the idiot before Baker? I think Mark Emmert just was the one who said, "I'm throwing up my hands. I need Congress to help us." Well, guess what? If you get a bunch of people who are their biggest fans are themselves, who don't understand the problem, you get stupid solutions like this. This doesn't fix anything. It's
This is 100%. They either polled people or talked to people, and comments they got were like, "Oh, these conferences, they're so big nowadays, it's
yeah,
destroying college football." And they're like, "Oh, we could fix that." No, that's not an actual problem. There are real problems that actually need to be fixed, but this is a problem that people complain about this. They're like, "Oh, these super conferences are killing the game." No, not actually. The problem isn't the fact that they're super conferences. The problem is that they're still competing on the same theoretical level as the MAC and the Mountain West. They are not at the level of the MAC and the Mountain West. There should be another tier of football. That's the real problem. The problem isn't that the SEC has, I mean, 16 now. That's the SEC having 16 teams and the Big Ten having 18 teams. That's not actually the problem. The problem is that there aren't 40 teams there isn't 50 or 60 teams in the Big Ten and SEC, and everyone else could go down a level. That's the actual problem, and actually the real solution is you tier it off, you make them competitively balanced, not just but then people are like, oh, I'm a Washington State fan, and now we used to be able to compete with Washington and Oregon, and we can't now.
yep,
You don't have the GDP to do that anymore. And some of the SEC and the Big Ten schools, Rutgers, Northwestern, they don't have the GDP to do it either. This is the problem, is that they're currently just getting this massive media deal and they think they can survive, but their days are numbered here too. It's just hitting the smaller ones first.
yeah. You also very quickly, but very in an informatively way, talked about this. They did some surveys. Any firsthand knowledge about that kind of polling stuff, or just something that you?
As a pollster, I'm always going to default. And this is the thing, right? A lot of politicians are very into whether or not they're just doing actual polling or they're just talking to, oh, my uncle likes college football. I'll talk to him about it. Or
Yeah,
like
no, that's
more than likely, someone in their office talks to their uncle. Oh, my uncle says that he's mad that
no,
because maybe he's from Washington or something. He's mad that Washington State. He now blames the Big Ten for why Washington State is in the state they're in. And yeah, it is their fault, but that's not the Big Ten being bigger isn't the problem with college football, right? And that's the point. And but the problem is that to sell this, to get up to for your constituents, and you say we stop the big conferences from expanding, people are like, yeah, I like that because I'm mad that the Big Ten kicked my team got kicked out in the Big Ten ain't our conference, right? That's an applause line for people. They're happy about that. They don't care about the fact that, oh, actually, that's not actually a problem. This is actually going to make things worse. So
yeah, no, that's something that we're good at here in the states, especially DC. So,
yeah.
all right,
And one thing I will just and this is keep it on the slide too. It's fine. The problem with this is, and I think a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh wow, Robert, you're like super libertarian here, and that doesn't sound very Canadian of you." But this is the problem with this is that I'm not against regulation. The problem is that the NCAA has basically never been regulated. I think there was like a bill in the 80s that was 40 years ago. And the problem is, say the whole point I'm trying to make is, say you pass this bill, and then the next time you regulate this is 40 years from now. You're going to do untold damage like to this if you pass this bill and leave it in place for 40 years or 20 years, even 10 years in some cases. The ramifications are going to be massive. So the problem is that Congress can't pass anything. You can barely Congress
yeah,
barely functions. The idea that like if you pass this and like the one transfer rule, let's say that passes to Congress, somehow becomes a law, whatever, people will within a year realize the slide I said. People are going to be like, oh shoot, smaller schools that have a good year are completely rated. rebuilds at the ACC and the Big 12 now take 3 to 4 years. This was a whole mistake. We have to fix this. Now you got to go to Congress and get them to do this again. And the only reason this bill is even close to being passing is because Republicans have a majority. So generally, again, a party will win the presidency. They'll generally have the House and the Senate. And in the next midterm, there'll be a backlash against them. And then the other party will generally win the House, maybe the Senate. So, like, it's basically a 6 year cycle. So, at minimum, if this bill passes, you're not passing another bill until the 2030s at least,
Yeah.
until the Republicans are going to have to get complete control again, which they wouldn't assuming that they would lose the presidency in 2028, they wouldn't be able to get the presidency back until 2032. So at this point, you're not going to be able to pass an amended law to this until 2032, likely 2033 or 2034. So you're already 8 years into the future of this. And people are going to realize this is a problem a year from now, 2 years from now, and they're going to be like, "Oh shoot!" And it's going to be another 6 years before it can be amended. So now, let's talk about this bill's path to becoming a law, because this obviously changes a lot. This is my job. I follow politics a lot on this. This is my day job. So it still needs to pass the full Senate vote. It did get out of committee, but generally bills will get out of committee. I think I suspect it probably will pass the Senate. I think enough generally senators are more in tune to their whole state as a whole, and enough of them realize that there's enough votes from smaller university and smaller university towns that they'll probably pass this. It probably will be close. There are going to be senators that are going to oppose it, but I suspect it'll probably get through the Senate. Even with the Big Ten and SEC fighting against it, those people will have smaller impact on for a senator rather than a congressman. But then that's where this kicks in. In the House is where this is going to be a dogfight, because the House needs to vote on it. Any pro-union Democrats, because again, this is the idea that this is
Oh,
protecting college sports. It's not from an asteroid. It's to bust a union that doesn't exist, basically. So pro-union Democrats are going to vote against this. The Congressional Black Caucus is going to vote against this too. So you're going to get most Democrats against this immediately. There's probably only a handful of House Democrats that are going to support this thing. But then also, in the biggest risk to this bill is there are a lot of Southern Republicans
yep.
from SEC schools that are literally graduates of that. That's why I'm saying Mike Johnson are LSU, because he's a graduate of LSU. Steve Scalise, again, normally it's funny because normally he are Louisiana, but it's R LSU in this case. Steve Scalise, he's the whip or the majority leader. I'm not sure exactly what his job is, but he's very important in the committee in the House Republican Conference as well. He is also from LSU. And again, I just kind of looked through the pages very briefly of some of the Republicans. I think one was a graduate of Michigan. There's probably a couple from Ohio State. That's just two states already. And again, Republicans have a very small majority in the House. Again, go to a couple are definitely from Alabama, University of Alabama. Some are probably from Auburn. Some are probably from South Carolina. All those people are going to be whipped against this bill. So the other issue here that I see, even if this bill does pass somehow through the House, which I doubt it will, and also on top of that, we are months away from the midterms. Congress generally doesn't want to pass anything close to the midterms because they're afraid of backlash. Also, they have to pass a defense authorization thing, and Trump is saying they have to add the SAVE Act to that. Again, we're not getting into the SAVE Act today, but it's just gonna cause a huge amount of problems. It's gonna be a huge deadline, just a huge fight over that. It's gonna cause a ton of chaos. This bill is unlikely to be able to slip past that. So I don't think this thing is gonna pass before the midterms, but I could be wrong on that. But maybe this passes in like a lame duck session after the midterms, but I probably doubt that. I think there's enough opposition in the House to stop it. But someone might also ask, so if the courts are saying the NCAA can't do these things without a players' union, couldn't a court rule that this violates a player's right to unionize? And the answer is, yeah, probably. That sounds like a thing that could happen. I
Yep.
guess, again, it's a bit weird that some of the Neil Gorsuch, again, nominated by Trump in his first term, weirdly pro-union. Those have been unexpected, but there seem to be a lot of Republicans on the Supreme Court that have caused a lot of these issues. They seem to be pretty on board with, hey, these players have a right to unionize. So yeah, the Supreme Court could just say, yeah, you can't do this. Make them go get a players union. And again, obviously, there's lobbying even of Supreme Court justices. I'm sure boosters also can go see Supreme Court justices and hang out with them too. So this is the thing, right? I This bill will probably pass the Senate. I think it's going to have significant problems in the House. And I think the Big Ten and SEC being against it because they're just randomly kneecapped in this bill for some reason, even though that's not what this bill should be trying to do. they're going to fight against this, and we'll see. The issue though, is that if this bill doesn't pass, the SEC and Big Ten are immediately going to say, "See, we can't be part of the NCAA anymore because the NCAA is so dysfunctional. They can't fix anything. We're going to pack up and we're going to leave, and we're going to take a bunch of other schools from the ACC and Big 12 with us." That's my guess as to what happens from this. Is that if this bill fails, that's what you're going to see. Also, the flip side, if it actually passes and the Big Ten and SEC just say, "Screw it, we're going to go make a super league," then that also happens too. So I don't know. There's no real scenario in which I just see this succeeding and everybody being happy. Something is going to go horribly wrong. A lot of people who support this bill because they're mad that players have infinite transfers, they're going to regret this bill for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, will it fix some things? Maybe, but also not everything, because again, you can't start putting caps on NIL without a players union. Even this bill can't do that. So you still can't fix the glaring issue. If you wanted a salary cap league of everyone has say $20 million, that's probably a low number, but everyone has $20 million, and you get 60 schools that can afford a $20 million football budget, then yeah, this could work. But the problem is that you're trying to regulate Ohio State and Toledo at the same time, and
Yeah.
you can't have one bill to impact both of those because they're not even remotely comparable to each other.
They are different industries.
Yeah.
3 points in response to this slide. Number one, not to be too fine, but I think this is big in terms of your comment on Gorsuch. I think that there is a big difference between being pro the ability to unionize and being pro union. I think that the former is extremely fair, free market, and the latter is a very different matter. And I think that makes this even trickier for the NCAA side in terms of
That's a good point.
protecting us from the union. 2 points that kind of join together. I think that this is not going to pass because it seems very much easier to get people pissed off against this and against it than in favor of it. Because third point, going back to the 90s, back in my heyday, when you were just watching SpongeBob or maybe not even born yet, when we had our government shutdowns, the budget deals that came out of that upset a lot of people, but it was for we can balance the budget. That was it. There was a greater good that everybody could see in the sacrificing for. This is the end product. There is no greater good that comes out of this. There is no vision that can get people to sacrifice for something else because what is what you get. There's no next level like, oh, if we pass this, then it's if we pass this, then it passes and it stinks and everybody's upset. So I think that gives it pretty strong headwinds in the House.
Actually, as a point to that, the only tangible thing you get this is one, you stop eligibility lawsuits and you stop Brendan Sorsby from suing the NCAA. This bill does a really good job of that.
Yes.
And that's it. It
That
fixes
makes
basically
sense.
nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Good stuff. Yeah, I think people are allowed their own opinions. So I think you and I are aligned on this one. Or no, don't know. This might not be news to you, Robert, but our Congress isn't the greatest to kind of get into the heart of the matter sometimes. That might be surprising to you.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Shocked. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. One last thing. Off-season development. I saw this last week. I read this story. It was great. Wall Street Journal. I subscribe. Love it. They had this story about a rich guy who neglected his family while he got rich, came back when he quit his job, sold his company, made millions and millions of dollars, tried to make it up by being a good dad, quotation marks, air quotes, whatever. So he, how do I say this? He took a very active role in his son's high school football program. So basically, this guy's name is Eric Obrokta is the dad. Watching, I guess, some blurbs here. Basically, he tells his son's first coach, "You need to change the offense." And the coach is like, "Who the hell are you? I'm a rich guy." So he basically enrolled his son into a private school and essentially bought the program, kind of a more direct method of first deed than Cody Campbell has second deed to Texas Tech. So he took over this private thing as a Christian high school. And he basically dumped $500,000 in the second blurb here on the program. His son, after his dad kicked in $500,000, basically in his junior season got 18 receptions for 185 yards. Surprised his dad said this isn't enough. He's going to the coaches and telling the coaches what to do. And this is in his junior year when basically is super important for recruiting because that's basically when you're going to get people's attention and so on. So The journal made a point to not mention his son's name, although you can obviously try to look it up real quick and figure it out. And so I did. I thought, I wonder what this kid. I wanted to see his LinkedIn to see, is he at Enterprise now or is he a National Car Rental? And guess what? He is. He is at Georgia Tech. Congratulations on his senior year. He booted up to 35 catches and 528 yards as a senior, 6 touchdowns, which good for him. He's quite more athletic than me, but that's that shouldn't get offers from basically any FBS programs. He got offers from, if you're just listening, I'll read them off here: Georgia Tech, Florida State, Liberty, Ole Miss, Tulsa, and UCF. I will also note that he, in his senior year, he basically went to a different high school. In junior year, the program that his dad bought was in Florida, and this caused such a rift with his son. His son said, "I love you, Dad, but you can't do this." So he just went up to Georgia, played at a different high school, got this offer. I bring this up, Robert, because I'm wondering if this is a sign of things to come, where I get somebody that's marginal who has a completely loaded dad, and his dad is willing to basically kick in $1 million to an NIL fund or a collective or whatever they are these days and give me a competitive advantage. Is that a fair assessment? That basically, why else would Florida say, okay, maybe Mike Norvell is desperate, but Ole Miss, why? What's the one thing that Ole Miss lacks? Funding. They're at a funding disadvantage. Actually, Florida State is broke now because they're, you know, they finally finished paying their severance for the prior mistakes, but they just don't have the funding to commit. Why else would these
Mhm.
schools go after a guy like this? No offense to the kid, but it doesn't make sense.
Like, congrats to this kid. Obviously, that's a messed up situation to be in the first place. He ended up at Georgia Tech. That's really good. But no, it's a tough situation. It is weird. Ole Miss just stick out there. 100% Ole Miss sticks out there as like, why were they recruiting this kid? Right?
Yeah.
And I think, no, sorry, eyelash here. No, it really does stick out as weird. Liberty, yeah, whatever. Georgia Tech, okay. Florida State, a bit iffy too. But like, it's when you're at the situation, again, the situation you're describing before sounds a lot like Auburn. Basically, it's like people who are donating to the program basically running the program. That sounds like
Yeah.
that's a lot of what that sounds like. And this is the kind of the things to come, right? Again, when you look at all these college programs, a lot of them are actually in the red. They're not actually making money year over year. They're actually losing money every year. And basically, they need these donors to survive, basically. And I think at a certain point, if they're like, "Hey, if you pay us this amount of money, we'll recruit your son, give him a chance," that might be happening in some of these cases. Again, I'm not saying that happened specifically with this kid, with this student here, but again, that's a big issue here. And I think especially when we're at a situation, if this Senate bill were to pass, the money is going to become even more important for a lot of this stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it is a big issue, especially it just highlights how the money here, and again, actual regulation of capping NIL and stuff could actually fix a lot of these problems. But we're not even trying to do that. We're just going to be like, okay, Brandon Sorsby can't sue the NCAA. We're going to fix that problem instead of actually fixing the problem of basically saying we need every dollar we can get, right? So
Yep. Yeah. And having said that, I'm sure I reverse jinxed this kid. Congratulations on being all ACC in his sophomore season. Proves me wrong. Just shoves it in my face.
so wait, how many years has he been playing now at Georgia Tech?
So he's a freshman. He's an incoming freshman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So next year, 2027, he'll be all ACC just to show me what I know.
I'll be rooting. This kid might be on the field. I'll be rooting for this guy for sure.
No otherwise, except for the Wall Street Journal for being a weirdo. Dad. So, all right, Robert, that is it. By the way, I just asked Gemini to put a picture of you and I watching Oregon play USC at Autzen Stadium. Just AI just never disappoints. Of course, it put me in the Toronto gear.
Yeah,
Where can we go? Toronto's playing USC 4-3. Autzen Stadium with its hallowed peristyle end, as we all
yeah.
know. Just this is
You
great.
also you
Yes.
have 4 arms?
No, I think I only have two. There's a random
No,
arm right there.
no, because you're
Oh yeah,
holding
look
the
at
flag
that.
up.
I've got, yeah. There we go. One, two, three, four. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're holding a flag that's a clipboard.
Yeah. Because who doesn't, right? because I need that when I also have a play sheet in front of my hand. Um, AI art never disappoints. It's
Yeah.
awesome. I also love where there's like the odds and visitors. I don't know. It's fantastic. Yeah, never disappoint. So, anyways, Robert, thank you. That was awesome. Enjoy the discussion. Everybody, stay tuned. Our next podcast that drops will be our head coaching preseason discussion. So, we will talk to you then.
So yeah.